Welcome to the Village Board meeting for the Village of Pleasantville. Today is Monday, January 10. If you are at home, you can watch on Zoom and pick up that link at our website, pleasantville-ny.gov. And within a short period of time, the tape of the meeting will be up on pctv76.org. So we're currently back to a Zoom world. Stay tuned on that, but I think we will likely be in the Zoom world on the 25th. When do the governor's order lasts till what, Eric?
The 15th.
Of January?
Yes.
Okay, so she almost certainly will extend that, right?
Correct.
Actually, I think it's already been extended to February 15th.
Okay, good.
Here we go.
At least at the county, that's how we're operating.
That's right. All right, so our next regular meeting is on Monday, the 24th of January. We'll also be via Zoom, work session at 7 p.m., regular meeting at 8. So I have some announcements to make, but rather than hold up Norma, we have a presentation by Norma Drummond, Westchester County Commissioner of Planning, on the results of the 2020 census. Hello, Norma, and welcome virtually to Pleasantville, New York.
Good evening, everyone. I am a very familiar person with Pleasantville. I actually grew up next door. I grew up in Valhalla in Mount Pleasant. So
it's all right. We've been wounded before. You could,
So very, very familiar. I did a lot in Pleasantville in my time. So if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen because I am here tonight to talk to you about Census 2020. And, specifically the county results, but I am interjecting into it the Pleasantville results because I think it's important for folks to understand not just the importance of census itself, but really locally to understand what it means to you guys as well. So, and I did send both the presentation and the specific table of data to Eric ahead of time. So, you guys have it available. If anybody would like to get the information, they can get it right from the administrator.
And that also, incidentally, for anyone watching, is a download at Novus Agenda, which is available to the public.
That's great. Good. Thank you. Because we run into issues right now because of accessibility that we can't put Excel data tables on our website just now. We're working with the company, with the county's website so that we can try to get some of these Excel database tables on the website. But right now we can't do that and stay in compliance. So this is the story of us. This is the story of Westchester County and local municipalities. Looking at how we changed from 2010 to 2020, but really just taking a look at the data, the first set of data that's been released as of August 12th of last year, which was really a focus of the population over 18. And so from that, we can extract a certain amount of information about the population under 18. But more detailed data will be coming out next year. Okay. The breakdown of children under 5 or children who are between the age of 5 and 18, how many people are over 65, how many people are between different age ranges, all of that will come out next year. The purpose of the data that's come out so far is for local municipalities, the counties, the states, et cetera, to be able to work with data, to be able to work on redistricting issues. So where you've got legislative districts for elected officials that are based on certain population counts, and you want to make sure that the districts are evenly there's an even diversity and an even distribution of people amongst the districts. That's the purpose of the data that's come out so far. And just a reminder for everyone that this is all based on where folks were living on April 1st, 2020. Some of you will remember the pandemic hit in Westchester County in March, right around the time when the portal opened for Census 2020, totally changing our ability to collect data and all of the events that we had planned. But the exciting news is that Westchester County has hit 1 million people. Our official count for April 1st, 2020 is 1,004,457 people. But there's a lot to be told about these folks. What I want to do is start at the national level, go to the state level, talk a little bit about the region, just to put it all in perspective. And I'm going to do this very, very quickly. I'm just kind of bouncing through this stuff, but I think it's important to just give the overall perspective. So the entire country is 331 million people. All right, the county, the federal or national population increased by 7.4%. There are 140 million housing units in this country. That increased by 6.7%. So again, this is the level of data that's out at this point. New York is the fourth most populated state in the country. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. Florida, with only, a couple, over 1 million people, more than us, has more seats, and they exceeded us after the 2010 census. So no surprise there. But we are now the 48th largest county in the country. So, that was kind of important. We frequently get compared to Montgomery County, Maryland, and that you can see from the list that I've got here that they're just a couple ahead of us and, not far off in terms of population. LA County by far is the largest county in the country. Okay. LA County has over 10 million people, the only county that exceeds 10 million. Second place is Cook County, Illinois at 5.2 million. So, the diversity even amongst the sizes of the counties is pretty amazing. The population as a whole has gone up to put us there. So from there, let's go to New York State and compare us with the local region. So Westchester associates with not just the New York metropolitan area, which is the 5 counties of New York City, but also the Hudson Valley. We're certainly a part of the Hudson Valley communities. And so I give you all of these communities here, and you see this, they're ranked by the increase in population between 2010 and 2020. And so Westchester County is really smack in the middle there in terms of our increase. So, there are 20,201,000 people living in New York State, which is a 4.2% increase. And they have 8.4 million housing units in the New York State area. But in this region, the largest county in this region is Kings County, or Brooklyn, which ranks 7th nationally, where we were 48th. Kings County, with 2.7 million people, ranks 7th, right in front of Miami-Dade County. Queens ranks 11th in terms of the populations. And then, the Nassau County, which is fairly close to us, it's ranks 30th. So again, to just give you some sense of perspective. 3 of our local municipalities in the Hudson Valley actually lost population. That's an important factor for where, with Westchester and many municipalities, most of the counties in this area actually gained in population. Sorry, I have to figure out how to advance forward. So as I said, one of the things that the data focuses on is the population of over 18, but from that we can extract the population that's under 18. So one of the scary things to note is that our under 18 population decreased. Now, not as much as New York State, but by far the New York State population of children under 18, New York State lost almost 5% of its under 18 population. Westchester County lost 2.6%. So we've definitely seen schools closing in certain parts of the county. Other parts of the county, the kids continue to grow, numbers of kids. You've got some school crowding issues in places like Portchester, but many, many parts of Westchester saw a loss of children under 18. Not as bad as Putnam County, our neighbor to the north, who lost 18% of their children under 18. But Rockland County across the river saw their under 18 population grow by 12.8%.
So Norma, based on that, would you say that one of the challenges of the future for these smaller towns and villages in Westchester is our ability to continue to attract young families?
Yep, that's definitely a big issue for Westchester, and the Hudson Valley as a whole as well. But there's some really exciting news in terms of the Hispanic population and the diversity of Westchester. The Hispanic population grew 30%, where New York State only saw a 15.5%. Now, Putnam did better than us, but Putnam had a 52.3% increase in their Hispanic population. And Manhattan County actually lost in their Hispanic population, not by much, but when we grow 30% and Putnam 52%, for any county to have lost Hispanic population is kind of interesting. The county's Black population grew 3.5%, where New York State lost almost 1%. Orange County saw the greatest growth in our region with a 22% growth in their Black population. And Brooklyn lost in their Black population, almost 9%. These are just some of the highlights of the region. I'm going to go into specific data for Westchester in a minute. The county's housing units themselves increased almost 5%, on par with New York State's 4.7%. Manhattan, where we just saw a loss of the Hispanic population, they had the greatest increase in terms of the housing units. Okay, so they've now got more housing units, but they're less diverse. So that's one of the takeaways from that, as opposed to Westchester is much more diverse.
And do
Yeah,
we
go ahead,
yet have the data on economic diversity?
No, not yet. Okay, again, some of this data will come out next year. Some of it is not actually census data versus American Community Survey data. So incomes and things like that is actually going to be ACS, American Community Survey. If you remember, the census 2020 was only 10 questions. Actually, it was 9 questions. Okay. Where do you live? Do you own your housing unit, or do you rent it? What's your, it was your address, what's your race, what's your ethnicity? So it was very, very few questions that folks answered. And there's no long forms because the Census Bureau does do the American Community Survey. So they do collect much more data from people who do that, the ACS part of things. So let's talk about the population. Again, our total population, 1,004,457. We saw a growth of 55,000 people, or 5.8%. Now, if you want my professional opinion, I don't think we necessarily saw a growth versus I think we did a much better job of counting. Okay, I think we did a much better job of making people feel comfortable in responding to the census, even in light of the pandemic. And to just give you some sense of that, this time around versus 2010 census, we had 8 municipalities that had a self-response rate of over 80%. In the 2010 census, we had no municipalities with a self-response rate over the 80%. So our response was at 79%, was well above, we were about 2% higher than where we were in 2010. And we were actually ahead of our 2000 response rate as well. But just to give you some sense, Pleasantville ranked 12th. You finished 12th from the top in terms of getting the best self-response. Your self-response rate was, I want to say 77.8, something like that percent. So you guys did really, really, really well. And again, the more people that we got to self-respond, the more accurate we know that data is, versus if somebody didn't respond at a housing unit, we know the Census Bureau was going to go back 6 times and knock on that door. And if they didn't get a response after 6 times knocking on the door, we don't know how they were going to count that housing unit. We actually had somebody in our office who worked as a census taker. So we were able to get really good sense from him as to how the process worked for the Census Bureau. And so what he said was he would go 6 times, and each time he would take notes about what he saw. Was there a bicycle in the yard? Did there appear to be people living there? Did it appear to be occupied? That sort of thing. And then on the 6th try, if he could not get anybody to respond and answer the door, he was allowed to go to a neighbor. He was allowed to go to a building super. He was allowed to ask people in the area, in the immediate area, if they knew how many people lived in that housing unit. But all they could really tell them, if somebody did respond, was pretty much how many people live there and maybe how old they are, but probably not accurate for information. So the self-response by far is always going to be the most accurate information. So to have 8 municipalities in Westchester with a self-response rate over 80%, that's why I'm saying I think we did a much, much better job of counting ourselves. So the 18 and over population grew to 77.8% of the population. We increased 1.9% from 2010. So as I said before, our under 18 population decreased. In reality, we only lost about 5,000 children. And if you look at the numbers, we were at 228,000 and now we're at 222,000 children. So it was a total loss of about 2.5% of the of that percentage of the population. There is no majority population in Westchester anymore. Anybody who thinks that Westchester is a white, non-Hispanic community can take that idea and just throw it out the window. Westchester is no longer majority anything. Okay, that's one of the most important takeaways I really want people to understand, that we are not a majority of any population anymore. 3 municipalities are actually minority majority. You have Portchester and Sleepy Hollow that are majority Hispanic, and the city of Mount Vernon is the only municipality that is majority African American or Black. Okay. But of the county's total population, only 49.5% of the total population is non-Hispanic white. And when you look at the under 18 population, only 41%. So only 4 out of every 10 children is non-Hispanic white. Our diversity is really, really growing. So that's really a good thing. We have more housing units and fewer of them are vacant. Please understand, again, this is another takeaway. Please understand Westchester will always have some number of vacant units. Westchester is a second home community for many people who live in Florida for 6 months of the year. And so we're depending upon the majority of the time where somebody puts their head at night is where they were supposed to respond for Census 2020. Okay. And so we will always have some number of units vacant because they are second homes. We will always have some number of units vacant because they were in transition on April 1st. Maybe somebody had moved out, they were selling. Maybe somebody had moved out of an apartment, had moved somewhere else, and the unit was vacant for a couple of days. Whatever it is, we will always have some number of units that are vacant. But again, we did a much better job of getting addresses for the Census Bureau ahead of time. We spent the summer of 2018 reviewing addresses, and as did many of the local municipalities, reviewing the addresses that the Census Bureau had to make sure they actually had all of our housing units here, especially, the new ones. What we did was we made maps of 2010, made maps of 2018 to see where new streets existed, to see where where housing had been torn down and replaced by larger buildings or large, and so we worked with that. And then we also looked to see where units didn't appear anymore. That we did have a couple places where units had been torn down and were replaced with open space or parks or things of that sort. So, understanding where the change in housing units, and in doing that exercise, though, the county planning department staff found 24,000 housing unit addresses that the Census Bureau did not have. So by getting better data into the system ahead of time, the Census Bureau was able to make sure each housing unit got information to respond to the census, for people to be able to do a better count of themselves. One of the other takeaways, by the way, is there are fewer group quarters residents. And when I get to this in the presentation, you guys will see Pleasantville is impacted by that as well. So taking a look at our population, and I'm going to give you the highlights of each of these areas for the county, and then, changes in growth. And I always try to include Pleasantville's information in there. So the municipalities, the municipal populations changed anywhere from losing 3.8% to growing 14.1%. The largest municipalities by population, the city of Yonkers by far, 211,000 people live in the city of Yonkers. They had an 8% growth with over 15,000 more people counted. New Rochelle second, Mount Vernon, White Plains, our 4 large cities are by far our largest municipalities. Greenburgh, number 5. So Greenburgh, exclusive of its 6 villages, by the way. Each of the 6 villages gets counted separately. An interesting note, when we were talking about the self-response rates, Mount Pleasant, had the hardest to count census tract. Last time around, that was in Yonkers, and also Mount Vernon. They were identified as expecting to have the high or the worst census tracts with the worst responses. Even the Rockefeller Institute identified a census tract in Yonkers as the hardest to count. But the Grasslands campus is its own census tract. And if you were, as I said earlier, with the pandemic hitting in March, They were a little bit busy for the people who live on the Grasslands campus over there. And so that is actually the hardest to count census tract. We did work with the medical center and medical colleges, et cetera, but actually we think the medical college students had gone home, et cetera. So there was, that was an area that's definitely an area where we don't think they got an accurate count. Ardsley and Buchanan are still our smallest municipalities. They're still number 42 and 43 of the villages and towns. Although Ardsley, even though they're one of the smallest, saw the greatest percentage of increase in population. And I'm going to go through percentage increases in a second. But just to give you some sense, Pleasantville, when we rank all the municipalities in terms of your population, you rank 31st. You had an increase of 444, almost 500 people since 2010. So percentage-wise, very, very different story. Percentage-wise, Ardsley saw the greatest increase, 14.1%. But in Ardsley, 14.1% is only 600 people, where you saw an 8% increase in Yonkers was 15,000 people. Larchmont second, Elmsford third, Ossining Village, and Mount Vernon. Okay, those are the municipalities that saw the largest growth by percentage. So again, Yonkers with the 8% growth actually ranked 10th in terms of the percentage growth. New Rochelle with adding 2,600 people ranked 30th in terms of their percentage growth, just to give you some sense. Looking at the Hispanic population, the county's Hispanic population has now grown to 269,000 people, an increase of over 62,000 Hispanics. So an increase of 30.1%. Every single municipality in Westchester saw its Hispanic population grow. Okay, from only one municipality, Sleepy Hollow, which is already majority Hispanic. Only Sleepy Hollow had a growth under 15%. Every other municipality saw a growth of over 15%. Actually, Pleasantville saw a Hispanic growth of 28.5%. So again, you're much more diverse there. But anywhere from an increase of 4.8% to 88.8% of an increase. So when I look at the municipalities with the greatest percent of their population as Hispanic, not growth, this is the greatest percent of their current population as Hispanic. Portchester and Sleepy Hollow, as I said earlier, are two minority, so they are majority Hispanic. And then Ossining, Peekskill, and Elmsford rounded out in terms of the 5 municipalities that have the highest percentage of their residents as Hispanic. We were wondering whether Ossining would actually get to minority this time around, but they didn't quite get there. So overall, while we had a 30% increase in our Hispanic population, 26.8% of the county population is Hispanic. And again, 11 municipalities had a growth greater than 50%. So they're great diversity here. And so 30 municipalities now have a Hispanic population over 10%, and 13 of them are over 20%. So increases wise, if we take a look at that to see where the greatest changes were in terms of the Hispanic population, Town of Somers saw an 88.8% growth in their Hispanic population. Ardsley, again, one of the very smallest communities, saw an 82% increase. And then Larchmont, Lewisboro, Newcastle kind of rounded that out. When we look at the cities, just to give you some sense, Portchester, which again was already majority Hispanic, ranked 39th of 43 municipalities in terms of its growth, even though they went up 20.3%. So the Black population in Westchester increased by 3.5%, but this is one of those situations where I got to explain this because it works out just a little bit differently and a little hard for some people to understand this. Overall, the county's Black population, while it increased 4,400 people, it increased 3.5% because the overall population grew. The percentage of residents who are Black dropped. We actually dropped from 13.3% to 13% because now before we were 970 something thousand people, and now we're 1 million people. So the bigger, it's a bigger number for that Black population to be a percentage of. So when I look at the individual municipalities to see where the greatest growth was. We have where the greatest percentage of their current population is now Black. It's Mount Vernon, by far the only municipality that is majority Black. But then the second, what a difference from 60% of a population being Black to 18.5% of their population in the city of Peekskill and the city of New Rochelle. And then Elmsford and Greenberg round out the top 5 municipalities in terms of the Black population. 15 municipalities had a 10% growth. I gotta move you guys. There you go. And 13 had a greater than 10% decrease in the Black population, and just to give you some sense, nationally, the Black population is leaving particularly the northern areas. Black population actually is increasing in the South. It is generally leaving the northeastern part of the country. So to see growth in the Black population, again, we're getting more diverse, even in light of the fact that many Black residents are moving south. So we kind of go against the grain with what we see nationally. So we do have 24 municipalities that did see their percentage of the Black population, kind of similar to the Westchester counties, going from the 13.3% to the 13%. 24 municipalities had that same thing. Pleasantville had a decrease of 17.4% in your Black population. So again, just so you get some sense of how you rank, and what the changes were within your municipality. So when I look at the areas that have the greatest percentage of increase or changes, Eastchester has a 366% increase of their Black population, only 814 people, but still almost 400%. Ardsley, again, that little tiny village, almost 100% increase of their Black population. And then Larchmont, Pelham Manor, and Ossining Town. Note down below who ranked 42nd. The town of Mount Pleasant lost. This was one of the greatest losses of the Black population. So again, for your area, you're doing much, much better than the town of Mount Pleasant. But still interesting to note that in your general area, you're an area that's losing in terms of the Black population, and White Plains as well, another area, over 10% loss. When we talk about the Asian population, that also increased. We saw an increase of over 13,000 Asian residents, over 27%, to having almost 65,000 Asian residents in the county. Municipalities ranged anywhere from losing up to 6.5% of their Asian population to gaining almost 94% of their Asian population. The municipalities with the highest percentage of their population claiming to be Asian, Scarsdale, by far, number one at 20.9%. They had an increase of 1,500, almost 1,600 Asian residents. And then Ardsley, that little village, again, keeps showing up. Greenberg, Newcastle, and Harrison round out the 5 municipalities with the highest percentage of their population as Asian. So overall, the county's Asian population increased from 5.4% to 6.5%. We now have 7 municipalities above 10% of their population Asian. I got to remember which group I'm on. 5% are below 3%. You're right in the middle there, Pleasantville. You actually had a loss of 6.4%. So in terms of the change from 2010, while Scarsdale has the greatest percentage of their population, Yonkers actually has the most Asian population, the most people when you look at the numbers. And Buchanan, our smallest municipality, only has 64. So again, you increased 53.5%. You went up 168%, but percentage-wise, you went down.
These are only people who identify as only Asian, not multiracial.
Right. This is specifically for people identified as Asian. Correct. Multiracial is a different category. So when we look at the areas with the greatest percentage changes, Buchanan, the little tiny village, went up almost 94%. Rye Brook, Larchmont, Scarsdale, and Pound Ridge saw the greatest increases. Again, because they came from the top 5 list before, I wanted to show you Yonkers and Greenberg, just so you can get a sense of where they ranked. And 3 municipalities actually lost in their Asian population. So Mount Kisco, Sleepy Hollow, and Tarrytown, lost anywhere from 2 people to 58 Asian residents. Housing units, the county's housing population or number of housing units itself grew almost 5%. So we now have 388,000, almost 389,000 housing units. We grew by 18,142. Municipalities were anywhere from losing 1.5% of their housing stock to gaining 12.9%. This is, when we look at the greatest periods of growth in Westchester, the 50s and 60s, the 60s and 70s, those are the areas, where we had the greatest growth. We are on a par with 2010, the growth that we saw between 2000 and 2010, and what we saw between 2010 and 2020. We're almost pretty consistent with what we're seeing now. So when we look at the municipalities that had the greatest increases in their housing units, again, partly I think this is because we did a better job of counting the address, making sure we had good addresses, and so counting housing units. So Ossining Village, Somers, Elmsford, Briarcliff, and Portchester had the greatest growth in terms of the numbers of housing units. Somers definitely saw a ton of new construction up there. So Baldwin Place and other parts of Somers definitely saw huge amounts of construction. Ossining, you had the whole waterfront growth there. You've definitely had some growth there. But like I said, I think we did a better job of identifying and finding some of the housing units. And our largest cities, just to give you some sense, ranked the 11th and 17th, Yonkers and Mount Vernon, in terms of their increases. The municipalities that lost housing units were Bedford, that lost 12 units, Pelham Village and Pound Ridge. Pound Ridge, we still can't figure out where they lost 32 units. That's one we're going to follow up on. But just to give you some sense, your housing units grew 8.9%. You went up 238 housing units from 2010. So you actually ranked 6th highest, just to give you, again, put you in perspective with the other municipalities. We also look at the Census Bureau, one of the data sets that they did release is whether the units are vacant or not. As I said earlier, we will always have some percentage of our housing units is vacant, but the good thing is we had more units counted and fewer of them were identified as being vacant. So our number of vacant housing units actually decreased over 8.8%, which is really good. We had 2,000 housing units now occupied as opposed to being vacant. For places like Yonkers, that's a big thing. So the areas that still have the highest number of vacant units, Briarcliff, New Rochelle, Somers, and Mount Pleasant. Only that we found this interesting. Only Cortland had the exact same number of units that in 2010 as they occupied as they did in 2020. So that's not likely to happen. So, and in the lowest changes in terms of vacant units, I mean, Peekskill literally had 2 units more vacant than they did 10 years ago. So the very few changes there in Sleepy Hollow, Irvington, and Mount Kisco. And then pretty much last discussion area here is group quarters. And we'll touch on density after this, but group quarters is the last data set that came out. So group quarters are identified as area or properties where people kind of live in a group specifically. So they tend to get excluded from certain calculations of funding and formulas. That's why they get counted. So they're prisons, they're assisted living facilities, they're nursing homes, they are dorms. Okay. So they are things of that where you've got a group of people living there for a specific reason. And remember, one of the important things is that college students get counted where they are dorming, where they are residing on April 1st, 2020, which is generally at the dorm, and they do not get counted at their home address, because 9 months of the year, they're actually away at college. So and by the way, every single municipality in Westchester has some kind of group quarters. But as a whole, our group quarter population decreased over 4,200 residents. So we still have almost 25,000 residents in group quarters. with the prisons being the largest. But, you'll see some of the decreases that I have listed here. So the municipalities with the greatest changes, New Rochelle saw the greatest increase. Harrison saw the greatest decrease. They lost 926 group quarters units. We believe it's because we don't think they accurately counted one of the dorms in Harrison. Harrison's got SUNY Purchase, they've got Manhattanville. So we don't think that they got the dorms before the colleges sent the kids home after the spring breaks in 2020. So that's why we don't think that's where Harrison's loss clearly is. Yonkers, Mount Pleasant, their loss is the group quarters is the prison on the Grasslands campus. Just prison populations as a whole are down. Same with Ossining. The Sing Sing prison population is also down. So that's why Ossining and Mount Pleasant both lost populations there. The municipalities with significant gains were Tuckahoe, North Castle, and Cortland. And then other significant losses, Dobbs Ferry lost 550, Tarrytown lost 443, and Briarcliff lost 439. Briarcliff lost the Pace campus, the Pace dormitory. So that's where that Briarcliff number is. So Pleasantville lost 153 group quarters, which is 44.2% of your group quarter population. So I think, and if I remember where it was, there was a juvenile institution that closed. So you guys would know that better than I would at this point. So, all right. And then let's just lastly, taking a look at density. This is, when we look at the number of people per square mile, there's a huge difference in this county from Mount Vernon, where we've got 16,000, almost 17,000 people per square mile, to the least dense community, the town of Pound Ridge, which only has 228 people per square mile. So just to give you some sense there, you're one of the 3 municipalities that moved up. You were ranked 19th last time around, and you're now ranked 20th. Sorry, you were 20th. Now you moved up. So you moved to 19th place. So, you became a little bit more dense than you had been before. So
What's our density per square mile?
I kind of knew somebody was going to ask me that. So hold on. I do actually have the sheet.
$400.
One of my sheets here. I'm going to look for it while I'm answering any questions that you guys may have. So that's it though. That's my presentation. So while I look for the density information for you, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So, did I hear you right, Norma, that you think, obviously the breakout of population has changed in various ways, but the county may actually not have grown much. It may just have been better counted.
Again, my professional opinion is that's what's happened. All right. That's really, we did such a better job of identifying the housing units and getting people to self-respond and having fewer vacant units, that's really where we're seeing the increase in our numbers.
And from a planning standpoint, the decline in population 18 and below, and the decline in the birth rate that we read about in the press are at least modestly nervous making. Is that fair to say?
It is to me, definitely. I mean, there are definitely areas in this county where they've closed schools. Other places, where you've still got some overcrowding issues, but if we don't have young people here to, as we all get older, we're going to need people to provide, services for our schools and for medical services people are going to need. So it's important for us to have people of all ages growing in this county.
And if you were a betting planner, these numbers theoretically were a snapshot right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yes. Well, I mean, in essence, they didn't close the reporting until October, but it was really supposed to be dated as of April 1st. Yeah.
So, you read, and obviously there are differing opinions about whether this just accelerated what was going to happen anyway, whatever. Certainly, housing has been popular for people moving from the city. Do you think that would change the snapshot if it were taken today? And does that presage something for the future, or is that just a weird pandemic thing?
So what we think is that based on what we're seeing, many people moved out of New York City, no question. And where even the New York City planners had a conversation with us in maybe a month or two before the pandemic saying, single family zoning is going to go by the wayside. Well, I don't think it's going to go by the wayside anytime too soon. I think the pandemic is showing us that people still want, when issues like that happen, people want their own backyards, and they really want to be able to step outside and even within their own property without having to come into contact with other people. So that's definitely one of the issues. Now, how much has the population changed? A lot of the growth that we saw, a lot of the home sales that happened in Westchester was really all over the county because we have 4 train lines, but a lot of the growth was along the train lines because people wanted an easy commute into New York City for when they would have had to go back into work.
So do you think, there's some anecdotal evidence in places like ours, short of, statistical significance, that older folks who envisioned retiring elsewhere at some point, but weren't ready to do so now, said, we better sell the house now because it's a feeding frenzy and a seller's market, which may have had the effect of reducing the average age.
Which may, but the question is, where did they go? Because there wasn't a whole lot of,
Right.
Unless you were already making plans to go to Florida or to go south, there wasn't a whole lot of rental housing getting built in Westchester to accommodate folks moving out of their single family homes and going somewhere else.
Which is, and is it fair to say then that, the issue to bolster and to stabilize the 18 and under community is in part better options for folks who are empty nesters to move into housing that more suits that stage of life and make room for young families?
Again, that's what generally, when you talk to folks, they'll tell you, my kid is starting kindergarten, I needed to move to the suburbs, because they don't necessarily want their kids to be going through New York City schools. I hear it all the time. Okay.
Right. But, there's certainly some evidence that was going to happen anyway, that for some families who were going to make that move at some point, the pandemic accelerated it, but may not really have changed the overall pattern, say, over a 10-year period.
Yeah, but again, what we saw with a lot of the folks who were moving out of the city, they didn't necessarily have families yet. They were definitely young people who were very technologically savvy, had the ability to work from anywhere.
Yes.
And were willing to have a longer commute when they would have to go back in exchange for the fact that they were getting out of the city. So, but they didn't necessarily have kids with them just yet. That's,
Do you think that, post-pandemic, the increase in work from anywhere-ness is likely to be a significant impact on the demographics of the community?
Yes. Yeah. I think the ability to work from anywhere. I mean, I have kids in there. My oldest right now is now 30, and, and what my kids are thinking is, oh my God, not anywhere. They literally are looking for jobs. When my oldest daughter was looking for a job, she looked anywhere in the country because it didn't matter where she lived versus where she was working. She could work from anywhere.
As long as she didn't have to move there, she'll take a job anywhere, right?
Exactly. Sure. The sky was the limit for her. She could really move. She could take a job pretty much anywhere because one of the first things she looked at was whether you had to be on site or whether you could work remote. So the post-pandemic, the work world is going to definitely change.
Any other questions? All right, Norma, thank you as always.
When I find the density answer, I'll get it to Eric to get to you
All right.
guys.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
We appreciate it. And we, I can speak personally, but I think on behalf of Pleasantville are appreciative of, the research piece and the future looking piece that the planning department provides, which has been reborn a bit under your guidance.
Well, the more we can keep the census alive, okay, and help people to understand why it's important, honestly, the easier it's going to make 2030. So that's an important piece of it for everybody.
So before we let you go, you want to comment about redistricting?
No, that's not mine. I'm staying out of that one.
No, I thought perhaps that was the case. So, all right. Thank you, Norma. Much appreciated.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
evening,
Norma.
everyone.
Good
Take
night.
care.
Bye.
All right. So anyone who would like to pick up on that stuff, you can go to our agenda, on Nova's agenda, that you can get to through pleasantville-ny.gov, and two attachments are on that agenda item. But Eric, maybe we could also post those as a separate file so people can get to them more easily. If you're interested in both her PowerPoint presentation, but also in the file of data, it's there and more is coming. That same stuff and more is also available at the Planning Department tab of westchestergov.com. Okay, so back, I just had a few announcements to make, not many. The first and looming one, obviously, is a COVID in its latest iteration is roaring its way through our nation and certainly through the county and through Pleasantville. Just share my screen here. So these numbers just got updated. We currently have, this is Pleasantville right here in the middle, 294 active cases. That is almost certainly a pretty dramatic undercount, because we're in a circumstance now where people who test positive at home with an antigen test are not ending up in this database. And so anyone who tested positive, talked to their doctor, whatever, is quarantining at home is not in this number. There are 294 active cases that were tested through an office that's connected to the state health department. So those numbers are not just a little bit more than they have ever been. They are stratospherically higher than they have ever been. You can go to this site, again, through westchestergov.com, and see here in the upper right what's happened to the new positive cases per day. And the positivity rating of tests, 20.7, was at one point down, in the very, very small numbers. So lots to be said, lots of differing opinions about what it all means, whether Omicron is less virulent, certainly less virulent for those who are vaccinated and boosted. But all I can say is from the county and the state health department, and from, I think, our reading of the science, it is really, really important, not only for your own health, but for the health of those in your family and those you interact with, to get vaccinated and boosted. The booster is really, really important. So the county has a bunch of resources available for testing. And I am anecdotally aware that some of the local pharmacies have antigen tests that are back on the shelves. They get sold out fairly quickly, but the supply seems to be getting better. If you want to have a stack of those, I think you can do a little legwork and make it happen. So moving to a slightly brighter subject. Here's our website at pleasantville-ny.gov. And a couple of things I want to point out. If you're subscribed to our news, which I encourage you to do right here, news and announcements, you would have gotten this email that says, never miss your waste collection day again. We've partnered with Sustainable Westchester, and you can download the mobile app Recycle Right Westchester, which is available both for Apple iPhones and Android devices. The link is right here. You can also search for it yourself. And if you don't have that, you can also go to the sanitation lookup on our website at pleasantville-ny.gov and do some of the same things. The app and this site gives you a chance to get a reminder. So please, it's a tremendous benefit to you to get a reminder of when your pickup is, especially in a week like we recently had a couple of rounds of holiday weeks where people were confused about when their pickups were because of the holidays. It's all right there at your fingertips, either via the web or via those apps. So please, please, please do it. Then the other thing I wanted to mention, which you also would have seen if you are on our news feed, is in Quick Links Police Reform. One of the things that was established was quarterly reports by the police chief, which are here, but also now a weekly blotter summary. And so you can also see this at any point and click into the weekly blotter to see what your police department has been active with. So again, pleasantville-ny.gov. If you go to news and announcements, you can sign up for all these things. I very, 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 very much encourage you to do so. It's going to make your life easier and going to make our life easier in trying to communicate with you. Anybody else have comments or announcements?
Just wanted to let everyone know that the Pleasantville Chamber of Commerce just launched our brand new website. We coordinated it a lot to reflect also the village as well. Like we're using the parking lot, the Pango, for anyone to find parking, and we've connected it a lot to different businesses that are in Pleasantville and to all the different news that's happening. We've connected it to the village website as well to get a lot of information from there. So it's a good place to go see all the different businesses here in Pleasantville.
Great, thank you, Paul, and thanks to the Chamber of Commerce for all the good work they do every year. And certainly in these challenging times, it's one of the ways in which we can kind of connect as we try to support one another and support our business community. Any other announcements? Any comments from any of our relatively few attendees? If you have a comment, raise your hand in the Zoom window. All right, seeing none, let me share my screen and we will go to the resolution. All right, there we go. Paul, resolution number 1 of the year 2022.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the minutes of the regular meeting held on December 27th, 2021. The minutes and the Zoom transcript are attached with this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments, questions, corrections to the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. David, number 2.
I abstained, by the way. I wasn't there, so.
Well, yeah, that's
record.
okay, right? Yes.
Yep.
We have 3 votes, so that
Yep.
it does, yes. All right, resolution number 2.
Resolve
David.
the Board of Trustees hereby approves the following budget amendment for fiscal year ending 2022 as listed below. $1,675 from A 9910.400 contingent to A 6773.417 Senior Nutrition Center repairs.
Is there a second?
Second.
Minor item, anything to report, Eric?
No, it was a repair for a walk-in freezer, but all good.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. Michael, number 3.
All right. Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the abstract for payment of claims dated January 10th, 2022 for fiscal year 2022, covering check numbers 102-406 to 102-575. For the general fund, $165,479.57. For the special purpose, $112.50. The water fund, $5,785.88. Capital fund, $87,085. The refuse fund, $10,110.56 for a total of $268,573.51.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions on the payment of claims?
Yeah, so there was some tree work on a couple of residences, maybe one on Pierce, and what was that?
Pearson, let's see. Yeah, that was, so whenever we typically remove a tree, it's in our right of way. We don't touch anything on private property.
Okay.
So we'll get a complaint from a resident about a tree that's, posing a threat to public safety. It's 53 Pearson, 22 Robbins.
Okay.
And we get an arborist out to take a look at it, write up a report for the village. And if it is posing a threat to public safety, we'll go ahead and remove it.
And then we bought a window for a salon or something like that.
Yeah. So during the Halloween window painting, there was an obscene paint job done on one of the windows. So we immediately had it removed by our parks department. And when they were washing the window cracked. And
okay.
so we had to replace that window.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, any other comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Back to you, Paul, number 4.
Resolved that the village administration / clerk is authorized to bid for bus services for summer and teen travel camps.
Is there a second?
Second.
I dare say that's pretty straightforward. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. David, number 5.
All the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the donation to the Clinton Street Center CM 0085 from Nancy Stevens in the amount of $50. Thank you, Nancy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Nancy. As well, I echo David's comments. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. So that's the last of our regular agenda items. Anybody have any new business or comment to add or comments from the public? Sounds like they don't. So we have one item to go back to work session on that we didn't get to, and that was to talk about the schedule for starting to hash out next year's budget. And then can I have a motion to return to work session and then to executive session on matters of personnel and real estate?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. We'll be back in 2 weeks. One of the things that I'll be able to report on in 2 weeks is I'm the legislative chair for the Westchester Municipal Officials Association, and we're putting together our legislative goals to try to hammer away at Albany, and I'll be able to give you a brief report about what that looks like. So I thank you all. We're going back into work session briefly to talk about our budget schedule, and then we'll return in a new Zoom link to an executive session for a few minutes. Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you.
All right. Now
Hey,
we're
I just want to say I'm hanging by a thread with my
All
with my maybe COVID, maybe some other virus, whatever I got going on. So
all right.
if
All
I
right,
if
then
I
maybe-
get up at any point, that's why.
Yeah, maybe we should just ditch the executive session, and I can call each of you, and we can reconvene in 2 weeks.
And Michael, go off video if you need to puke. Don't feel like
I would do you that honor for sure. Yeah.
Nicole's out. You're operating on your last cylinder and the last meeting. So let's just quickly talk about the budget timeline. Eric.
Yeah, so I just wanted to get the dates on everybody's calendar. As you may remember, February, but all of March is just consumed with budget. So if any of those dates are unworkable, just let me know. I think as we did last year, I believe we'll have the capacity to do this entirely on Zoom, which may make life a little easier.
Makes it easier. Can you send those out as Outlook meetings or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think Alyssa also sent out as an Outlook invite, the state required property tax grievance day, which is Tuesday, February 15.
Yeah, that's a week I'm supposed to be gone. So, and hopefully we'll be gone one way or the other.
But you could be sitting on grievance day from a hotel room.
I could.
All right.
And my wife would have the grievance.
Right.
All right. That's your problem, Vinja Murray. We're not getting involved in your spousal politics. All right. We'll touch base during the next couple of weeks about a couple of the matters that we were going to discuss in executive session, but let's relieve everybody of obligations and call it a day. We will not go to the executive Zoom.
I hope you guys feel better.
I do too.
Thank
Feel
you.
better.
Likewise.
How long has this been going on for you, Michael?
It seems to have ramped up yesterday, so I felt a little off a couple days ago, but
Yeah.
it's been weird all these winters where like, yeah, you got a little cold here and there, you got a little scratchy thing here and there, and you're always wondering if it's COVID or if it's not. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I
know
took
we
a
got-
rapid test was negative.
Yeah.
It could be something else, just the way
I
it is.
just got today's list, which from the weekend, 52 new positives. So we're rocking and rolling. So, all right, all. Good night and thank you.
Take
Bye.
care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.